The US and Israel are officially clashing with Iran. One side launches epic airstrikes. The other responds with devastating retaliatory bombings. You strike my leadership, I hit back. You threaten to overthrow me, I strike back at the entire neighborhood. But don't just watch this as a spectator sport. How does this highly unique geopolitical conflict actually affect ordinary people? How will it impact your wallet? And in what direction will it drive various asset classes? In this video, we will only focus on the hard facts that affect everyone's finances. Simply put, will ordinary people globally end up paying the bill for this war? Let's start with the conclusion. If both sides remain locked in a relentless, escalating brawl without backing down, we are highly likely to witness yet another historic moment where risk assets plummet and safe haven assets soar. The magnitude of these market swings depends on one critical variable: the geopolitical chokepoint of the Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz, and whether it will be blocked. Approximately 25% to 31% of the world's seaborne oil passes through this strait to reach global markets. Oil exports are also the lifeblood of Iran's economy. But if Iran adopts a mutually assured destruction mentality and decides to block the strait, it would be the equivalent of dropping a nuclear bomb on the global energy market. Therefore, in a U.S.-Iran clash, if the Strait of Hormuz is compromised, global oil prices will be the first to suffer. Just before the official outbreak of the conflict, Brent crude futures were hovering around $73.19 per barrel. However, massive amounts of analysis currently point to one outcome. If the strait is blocked even temporarily, international crude prices could instantly break $100 per barrel, just like during the onset of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, or even spike to $120 to $150. If that happens, global fuel prices at the pump will skyrocket to historic highs, severely impacting everyday transportation costs. What about precious metals like gold and silver? When the cannons fire, gold goes up. As the ultimate safe haven asset today, gold prices have already surged significantly in response. To put this in perspective, a week before the Russia-Ukraine war broke out, gold was at $1,900 an ounce. After years of global turmoil, gold multiplied in value. Crucially, when you combine this with the ongoing trend of central banks globally selling U.S. treasuries to buy gold, a macro shift known as de-dollarization, the ceiling for gold prices seems currently out of sight. Next is the stock market. War inevitably triggers a wave of panic selling across global equities and risk assets. However, for non-participating nations, this impact is usually short-lived. Furthermore, specific sectors such as defense, precious metals, and energy might actually experience a temporary boost. Large-scale conflicts also typically drive short-term spikes in globally recognized safe haven assets, like U.S. treasuries and cash dollars. By the way, cryptocurrencies, which have long been touted as digital safe havens, crashed immediately upon the outbreak of the conflict. It makes their safe haven narrative look incredibly awkward. Additionally, due to Iran's unique geopolitical position, a sustained conflict would inevitably keep global energy prices permanently elevated. This would cascade into higher costs for global manufacturing, aviation, and international trade. Ultimately, this would lead to severe imported inflation for importing nations, putting massive pressure on the global cost of living and driving up consumer prices. Many might ask, now that the war has started, how will the situation evolve? Put simply, war is always just a means to an end. It is either to secure greater interests or to eliminate enemies and resolve disputes. So, what are the fundamental disputes between the U.S. and Iran? First is the frequently mentioned nuclear issue. The U.S. demands absolute denuclearization from Iran, even forbidding civilian use. Iran's stance? We can agree not to become a nuclear-armed state, but we will not surrender, nor will we abandon all nuclear capabilities. Second is ballistic missiles. The U.S. insists Iran must completely halt research and deployment to ensure they cannot strike Israel. To this, Iran's response is basically a scoff. Third, who calls the shots in the Middle East? The U.S. demands regional hegemony and insists Iran cut off support for its regional proxies. Iran's feedback. The Middle East is our neighborhood. If we cut off our allies, we lose our deterrence and our ability to defend ourselves. As a result, after previous rounds of talks, aside from showing slight flexibility on the first point, Iran outright rejected the other two. Thus, the US and Israel launched unilateral strikes. The original mainstream view on the US and Israel's war objectives was prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons and advanced missiles, eliminate security threats, and maintain their hegemony over the world's most vital resource hub without getting dragged into another quagmire like Afghanistan or Iraq. Therefore, the mainstream market currently divides the potential outcomes into three scenarios. First, following the tough rhetoric from the US and Israel, executing a decisive strike to completely overthrow the current Iranian regime. Second, conducting multiple rounds of strikes aimed solely at destroying Iran's nuclear facilities and advanced missile capabilities. Third, a strategy of fighting and negotiating simultaneously, trying to bomb Iran into submission. The worst-case scenario is that the war spirals completely out of control, just like the Ukraine conflict, turning into a massive, prolonged war of attrition. Regardless of the scenario, they are playing with fire right on the world's energy jugular. This will cause global capital markets to either experience massive, instant crashes and spikes, or suffer a slow bleed with intense, pulse-like volatility. Of course, some might ask, what if both sides miraculously sit down to negotiate? Or what if one side strikes so hard that the other completely backs down? How will asset classes react then? The likely outcome is this. First, crude oil prices will drop sharply, easing the panic over skyrocketing fuel costs, though with the rise of EVs globally, many won't need gas anyway. Next, gold prices will definitely see a short-term correction. However, given global instability, the macroeconomic fundamentals of central banks buying gold and de-dollarization remain largely unchanged. Global stock markets will likely stabilize temporarily, erasing the panic and welcoming a wave of relief rallies. Furthermore, with the threat of blocking the Strait of Hormuz removed, ordinary consumers globally won't have to worry about a massive surge in the cost of living driven by energy prices. It seems that if this happens, our lives can return to normal. But over the years, reporting from conflict zones globally has taught us a harsh reality. If peace is only achieved through the brutal machinery of war, for the civilians living on those lands, it means endless separation, death, and homelessness. It means enduring countless long, freezing nights filled with starvation, despair, and terror. Finally, a piece of life advice. If you are currently dating and want to know if your partner is truly as financially successful and literate as they claim, observe their attitude toward this Middle East conflict. If they aren't just treating it as entertaining news, but are genuinely frowning at the economic implications, there's a high probability they aren't bluffing about their financial status.